Hours after the 2016 shooting that ended 5 police officers' lives at a rally against police brutality in downtown Dallas, Mark Hughes was making the long walk through the chaos of the night back to his truck with a friend. His friend's phone rang.
We received a phone call. And the young lady I was with, it was her sister. Her sister was telling her exact words verbatim. Get away from Mark. They are going to kill him. She's like, what? And the volume was so loud that I could hear her. Get away from Mark. They're going to kill him.
Hughes grabbed the phone.
And I got on the phone. I was like, wait, what do you mean? Who was going to kill me? And she said, the police are going to kill you. You're all on the news. And I explained to her what my brother had just did an interview. And I was standing behind him. Of course I'm on the news. She's like, no. They're saying you're the shooter. And she said, I'm going to send you a picture. I'm in an area where I'm surrounded by police officers. I'm surrounded by not only DPD, it's different agencies down there. And I just found out that they're looking for me.
You're listening to the CobCast. I'm Cobb, and this is the cast. Hughes, a North Texas activist, had come to the rally openly carrying an AR-15 rifle to make a point about gun rights and self-defense. That's legal in Texas. But then, Micah X Johnson, a 25-year-old loner angry over a tide of police shootings of black men nationwide, opened fire on police immediately after the rally. Johnson went to downtown that night to kill white police officers. Hughes, who had no involvement in the shooting, suddenly found himself an armed black man among a sea of police officers who were being targeted by a sniper. 4 Dallas officers and 1 from Dallas area rapid transit would die that night. Then, Hughes' situation grew worse. At 10:52 p.m. that night, the Dallas Police Department posted a photo of Hughes on its Twitter page. In the photo, Hughes was wearing a camouflage t-shirt with his AR-15 slung over his shoulder. This is one of our suspects, the post read. Please help us find him. The streets around Hughes were flooded by streams of police, headed toward where Johnson had holed up in a building at El Centro College. After getting his warning call, Hughes took off his camo t-shirt. He was confused. He didn't have his gun anymore. Shortly after the shooting started, Corey, Mark's brother, persuaded him to give his gun to a nearby police officer to prevent any misunderstanding, an incident that was caught on camera. This officer had given Mark his business card, telling him to call next week to get his gun back.
And so I told the young lady I was with, I said, hey, I'm going to go over there and tell these officers I had nothing to do with this. And she was like, no, whoa. If you go over there, they're going to kill you. And I said, no. If I stay here, they're going to kill me. So at the same time, a lot of stuff is going on around us. We're trying to think about what's going on. I done took my shirt off, so all I have now is my black shoes, my black shorts, and my shoes. And I told her, I said, what I'm gonna do is the next officer I see to drive by, it was 1 officer, 2 officers in the car, I'm gonna stop and have a conversation with them. And that's pretty much what I did.
Minutes after the photo was posted to DPD's Twitter account, before anyone was able to contact Mark, Corey appeared on CBS 11 to defend his brother. Around 11:10 p.m., a police officer pulled Corey away from the interview for questioning. Meanwhile, Mark had finally mustered the courage to approach 2 officers. He explained how he was just exercising his Second Amendment rights and had already handed his gun to another officer. The officers brought their sergeant over to hear Mark's story. The sergeant asked Mark if he could take a ride over to the police command post to tell the officers there the same thing.
And the officer was like, well, okay, can you do me a favor? Do you mind riding over to command and telling them exactly what you told me? I said, man, I'm tired. I just really want to go home. If you call the officer, he'll do it. He'll clear it for you. He's like, man, Mark, it's only gonna take us 5 minutes.
After telling those officers his story, Mark was brought to the homicide offices at DPD headquarters. 5 minutes turned into hours. Hours of interrogation, accusations, and Mark telling the same story again and again. Things could have been worse for him. He could have fired his gun that day at a gun range like he wanted to, after buying accessories for his AR-15. Luckily for him, he owns and operates a snow cone business and had ice in his truck that day. If he had fired off a few shots at the gun range, the ice would have melted and his weapon would have been covered in gunshot residue, giving the police one more reason to suspect him of being a shooter. For this, he considers himself lucky. Jeff Hood, an activist and co-organizer for the rally, says he started preparing for the protest after the death of Alton Sterling, a black man who was shot by police in Louisiana that week. Days later, the fatal shooting of Philando Castile by a Minnesota police officer was live-streamed on Facebook for the world to see. This prompted Dallas activist Dominique Alexander and his group Next Generation Action Network to get involved in organizing the rally. The Castile shooting is what encouraged Hughes to open carry.
My man was legally carrying, did what he was told to do through his CDL training to let the officers know that he had a gun. And that still didn't save his life.
Castile's killing reminded Hughes of a recent Donald Trump rally in Dallas, where attendees were openly carrying their firearms. No one lost their lives there, Hughes says.
But this young man had a license to carry and still lost his life that day. So at that point, I got to the point I said, you know what? We're citizens. My skin tone is not a threat. Just as well as they have the right to carry their guns, we do too. And that made me take my gun out there that day to the protest.
Hood says he never wanted guns at the rally. While he says what happened to Hughes was wrong, Hood believes everyone open carrying that day put the protesters' lives in danger.
On some level, there is never going to be a completely positive relationship between the police and citizens when a gun is in between that relationship.
Hood says there had been many conversations before the rally about how guns didn't belong at the peaceful demonstrations he and others were organizing.
I was very fearful about people bringing guns. And, our contacts with the police department, my contacts with the police department had explicitly said, please no guns, no firearms. We had been having that conversation, how do we get people not to bring guns and that sort of thing. Because even before that, we knew that if people brought guns, it put all of us in danger.
Besides a brief conversation with his brother Corey, Mark says he had not been asked to not bring his gun. Most depictions of the rally up until the shooting were of a peaceful demonstration. During the rally's planning, Hood said he had been in contact with DPD to help ensure that everyone was safe. DPD officer Sean Owens was monitoring the protest from the department's headquarters with a few others. The night was going well, and Owens' shift was just about over when a voice came through one of the radios.
I was talking to the lieutenant, getting ready to head out, and that's when I heard Sergeant Brown come on the radio and say, shots fired, officer down. And it was kind of one of those surreal moments. We all kind of looked at each other because everything had been going so well. There were no issues. And all of a sudden that come on, I looked at him, I said, did somebody change the radios?
The voice turned out to be one of their sergeants working at the rally. From there, the team was bombarded with communications from officers and rally attendees. There were calls regarding multiple people open carrying that night before the rally. When shots erupted, these reports increased, Owens says. Everyone with a gun was a suspect after the shooting, he says. Eventually, the team of officers began receiving calls about Hughes.
Well, the whole reason that was honed in on is because of citizens. We were bombarded with calls and Facebook leads about this suspect has a rifle in this area. It wasn't like police said, oh, fuck Hughes, we're going to get this guy. And this is all citizen-driven, all response-driven. So it wasn't like a DPD was going after this guy because he's Mark Hughes and he's a black man carrying a rifle. It was all these people who were actually in the freaking, parade and such, letting us know, hey, you might want to check this guy out. He's running out with a rifle.
Nearly everything that could have gone wrong for Hughes that night did. For one, Simon Vincent was working the rally. Vincent is a freelance photographer. He uses a phone app called Stringer to find work sometimes. The app notifies him when and where local news is taking place that publications might want photos or video of. That day, the app brought him to the march in Dallas. Among the crowd of protesters traveling along Main Street, Vincent captured the rally on his camera as the sun set. At 8:42 p.m., minutes before Johnson began shooting, Vincent snapped a photo of Hughes. Unable to get to his car in the immediate aftermath of the shooting, Vincent stayed put and began showing his photos to another reporter. At the moment Hughes' picture popped up, a passing officer caught a glimpse of Vince's camera screen. The officer reached over and grabbed the camera, Vincent says.
And he goes, where's this picture from? I go, just a crowd shot. He goes, you know this guy? I go, no, I know he was in the crowd earlier. And he says, well, we need to get a copy of this picture and you need to come downtown with it.
Before he handed the camera back to Vincent, the officer took a picture of the screen with the photo of Hughes. They got into the officer's car and headed downtown, where Vincent says he was interrogated for hours.
It was really funny because the officers that take me downtown, they made it sound like it was voluntary. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then I got downtown and then the whole tone changed.
Vincent and the Hughes brothers likely crossed paths in their trips to DPD headquarters. Unfortunately for Mark, he misplaced the business card of the officer he had given his gun to. Also, his phone was dead, so he couldn't contact his brother or anyone else who was with him when he surrendered his gun. That left the interrogators unable to clear him. But Mark says the interrogators he met at DPD headquarters didn't want to hear his story. Eventually, the interrogators were able to verify his story, but said witnesses had seen him fire his gun.
They took me to interrogation room, investigation room, whatever you want to call it. And the first thing they did is they ran my fingers for ballistics. They took my shirt from me. They took pictures of me front, side, and back. The officer came in, asked me about if I knew what I was there for. And I was like, yeah. I'm here to tell y'all that I had nothing to do with it. I got this business card. He was like, no. How long have you and your brother been wanting to kill police officers? What? So now my fear has went to another level. Because now y'all are saying, I want to kill police officers. They do the tactic where they leave you in the room, come back in, another officer come in, leave you in the room, come back. He came in one time and he was asking me about the card, and I was like, I didn't have it. The young lady I was with, I had her keep it. And my cell phone was dead, and so I didn't have any numbers. And he was asking me to call some people that could help validate my story, and I couldn't think of anyone's number. So again, he left the room, he come back in, and this time he comes in and he says that he has good news and bad news for me. Good news is he found the officer that had my gun. My response was, I told y'all to do that hours ago. If y'all would have done that, I wouldn't be here. He said the bad news is that we have witnesses to say they saw you shoot your gun. And the conversation went completely downhill from there. Completely downhill.
In another interrogation room, likely not too far from the Hughes brothers, Vincent says he was telling officers a different story from the one they were telling Mark.
then I was downtown. I couldn't leave. An officer came in, asked me about the picture. Had I seen Mark Hughes? I said, yeah, he was, exercising his Second Amendment right. He was carrying the rifle and whatever. And he said, you see anybody shooting anything? I said, nope. Didn't see anybody shooting anything. And they said, do you think this guy had done anything? I said, nah, probably not. He didn't seem like the guy to do anything, right? Mm-hmm. And they said, okay, we'll be back. Well, literally, they didn't come back for hours.
A DPD intelligence officer familiar to the protesters finally put in a good word for him, and he was allowed to leave.
And I'm not gonna lie, I felt bad. Because, here I am, the picture that they got was my picture, and I knew the guy hadn't done anything, but yet, they're out there, they got this picture everywhere, but like I said, they literally grabbed my camera, took a picture of my screen, and then they said, you need to come downtown with us. And that situation, not cooperating, I probably shouldn't have.
Mark and Corey weren't released until about 1 a.m. the next day.
So as we're walking out, we came to a spot to where it was like a lobby or something. And again, I hadn't seen any news, nothing. So I'm still lost on what's all transpired since the shooting and now. And when I looked in there, it was a huge TV in there. When I looked in there, it was on CNN. And the first image I saw was myself. And that's when it became real. That this wasn't local news. This was worldwide news. Not only that, now it was even more imperative that I got my rifle back. And so I asked the officers, where? Because now they were walking me out. And my what I asked them was, where were my keys to my truck? Because I didn't have those. Where was my wallet? Because I didn't have that. And more importantly, where was my gun and my shirt? Because again, I'm still walking around with no shirt on, And the officer, he came and he brought me back my keys. He brought me back my wallet. And I said, where's my gun and where's my shirt? And I wasn't asking in a nice, polite way because now I feel like I've been wronged for y'all keeping me down here when y'all could have done something a long time ago. Now I'm demanding my stuff back because you have no reason to keep it. And through my demand, they put me back in handcuffs and wanted to lock me up for disorderly conduct.
The same officer who pulled Corey away from the initial interview about Mark was there, and he let the brothers leave. The two appeared on television for an interview at about 1:30 a.m., around the same time DPD killed Micah Johnson. They had driven a robot equipped with explosives into the offices at El Centro College. On TV, meanwhile, Corey said he had asked the officers if they were willing to tell the public that he and his brother weren't involved in the shooting. Police told the brothers this couldn't happen until after their investigation. DPD took down the Twitter post a couple of days later, but it had already been shared by thousands of people. It took Mark months to get his gun back. His camouflage shirt was never returned to him. Hughes filed a lawsuit accusing DPD of illegally arresting him without probable cause, illegally holding his property, his gun, car keys, and camo shirt, and intentionally inflicting emotional distress upon him and his brother. Hughes says he received death threats in the months that followed, and the incident affected his businesses. To this day, neither the police department nor the city has openly apologized to the Hughes brothers, but Mark is looking to get more than an apology out of his lawsuit. He wants a settlement. While there have been some numbers thrown out, he says, the lawsuit is far from being resolved. In the years following the shooting, Hughes says he was looking for answers. Why was his image released? Whose decision was it to release his photo?
It was a lot of questions need to be answered. It was a lot of arrogance for the police department. They didn't want to come to the table and have the conversation.
Although he doesn't agree with Hughes' decision to carry a gun that night, Hood says he thinks Hughes deserves to win his lawsuit.
So I can disagree with Mark bringing the gun that night, but what I will never agree with and never promote is what they did to Mark. And what they did to Mark was disgusting, disgraceful, and I think the city of Dallas should have to pay over and over and over again.
If he had to, Mark says he would do it all over again because it was his right to carry a rifle that night. He says the fight against inequality and police brutality hasn't gotten any better. He says anyone who wants to join the fight should get out and vote.
Don't think that your voice is not enough. Don't minimize your voice. Because by thinking that little old me can't make a change, you'll never make the steps to creating change. So that would be my advice. Go to some of these informational meetings. Learn who your local candidates are, because that's what affects you the most. Your local candidates. Find out who they are and what they stand for, and then understand that your voice is power.
Mark says he still has dreams about his experience, but with all the bad things that happened, some good came out of it.
Sometimes I sit back and I still be like, damn, like I was almost gone. That puts so much less trust in the police department that night. Those are the negative things. The PTSD, those are the negative things. But I think more positive has ended up coming out of it than anything. The positive definitely outweighs the bad.
I'm Jacob Vaughn, a journalist based out of North Texas. Some people call me Cobb. And this is the CobCast. Thanks for listening.